Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the, I don't know, 17th, 18th, what is this, the 20th corporate service meeting?
Oh, no, we're in the high 20s now.
We're in the high 20s now. So looking for disclosures of pecuniary interests, Councillor Park.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On item number 3, regarding a property at 553 South Street, I declare an interest as my family owns a neighboring property.
Okay. 553 South, very good. Any others? Councillor Morgan.
Yes, I'd like to close a pecuniary interest with respect to agenda item number 3, specifically as it relates to application number 2016-123 on the 123 on the tax agenda, as I am involved in a separate property matter with the assessed party.
Did you get which item it was?
Yep.
Okay. So we'll turn to, we have one consent item this afternoon, backed by popular demand, proposed sign bylaw, third time's a charm. So I'm gonna look to, does anyone want to highlight what's changed, or is there anything further here? Ms. Corman.
As per the committee's direction on the 12th of September, there are new definitions in the proposed bylaw, electoral district, nomination day, and writ of election. We also made amendments to clauses 2.4, 2.5 to reference electoral district rather than electoral ward, so that the bylaw can be applied to provincial and federal elections. And most notably, we've also removed the site triangle definition. So we've simplified the restrictions for election sign placement by measuring just from the roadway, restricting now just 5 meters regardless of proximity to intersections. And further to that, once it is over the 5 meters, within 5 to 8 meters, the sign height has been restricted to 0.9 meters. And then after those 8 meters, the sign height is permitted to the maximum of 4 meters. Those are the most significant changes to the bylaw.
Members of the committee, Councillor Usher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't want to, I just have a few questions quickly that the public has been asking me. And one of them is with respect to the 72 hours removal of signs, 72 hours. There was a time when this used to be a week. They're asking, why is it 72? Because sometimes people don't have the opportunity to remove the signs within 3 days. And some people move it the following weekend. So could you help me understand it? I'm asking this for a member of the public.
Ms. Corman, was it previously a week in the previous bylaw?
The previous bylaw actually did not have a timeline for the removal of signs. There was a general guideline that it was within a week after the election. So upon doing a survey of other municipalities and finding best practices, it was found that 72 hours was consistent with that, 48 hours being on the lesser side, but 72 hours was consistent with other municipalities.
Okay. I do know that in the past, sometimes people did not get a chance to remove all their signs. They moved most of it, but they did not get a chance to go around until the following weekend, which is more like 168 hours. And I just think that this 72 hours is a little too quickly. It's nice to be able to say you have to pick up your signs immediately, but there will be signs out there after the 72 hours, right up to the weekend after. So I'm just concerned about how we're going to handle it, because I don't think those people should be charged or penalized.
Let me just ask that question. Do we charge people if their signs are after 72 hours? Or do we, if it's a grossly offending sign, we just pick it up?
There's no charge. We just go out and remove the signs, but I should note that enforcement works on complaint basis. So we go out and remove them on a complaint basis, store them then at the location at AJ Tyler for a candidate to come remove.
Well, I'm
Counselor?
going to try, I don't know if it's too late to do this, but I'm going to try a motion to change it to 4 days instead of 3 days, which would be 96 hours.
Okay, so let's do it this way. Let's hear the rest of the commentary, and then I'll come back to you, Counselor, okay?
I have another question. Can you help me understand the 0.9 meters height? Is that from the ground to the top of the sign we are talking about, or is that the size of the sign?
Thank you, through the chair, to the councillor. That's to the top of the sign.
So if I have a sign that is, I'm thinking 24 by 24 inches, and it's 18 inches off the ground, that's 3.5 feet. That's a little more than a meter. Then that does not meet the bylaw. Am I right? Because there are lots of signs right now that are 2 by 2 feet. And they generally put them, the type that I'm talking about, the older type, not the ones that are on the metal sticks. They generally put them about 18 inches above the ground, if they got 2 sticks. So the top of that sign would then be a little more than 0.9. I just want to know, there are not a whole lot of those type of signs anymore, but people do have some of the incumbents. I just want to know if they're going to be penalized for that.
Before we go there, can I just ask a question? Like, point 4 wasn't a point of discussion the last time we were here. Was it in the previous version of this update?
Mr. Chair, you're speaking about the height restriction that we're talking about. This is in, to make it simpler for candidates and their volunteers to measure at the corners. So we removed the complicated definition of site triangle, and instead said, if you're within 5 meters of the road allowance, the height of the sign can't exceed 0.9. If you're beyond that, it can go up higher. So the rationale is that when someone's driving, that height of a sign within the 5 meters does not restrict the driver from being able to see.
I believe the council's question was if it's larger than that, there's the other zones. So it's really the 2 zones. There's nothing from 0 to 5. Then there's the 5 to 8, and then beyond that, that sign can be in that zone there.
I'm not so sure. I guess what I'm asking is that I'm saying that there are some of the older type signs from some of the other incumbents who may have signs that the way they put it up might go up to about 3 foot 6 inches if they got a 2x4 and it's 18 inches off the ground. So I'm just asking if those will be penalized. There will not be a multitude of them, but there might be some of them.
Those signs would still be permitted, but they would be permitted beyond the 8 meters. They wouldn't be allowed between the 5 and the 8, but they would be permitted beyond the 8 meters.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, I have a question. I'll enter into the debate after. First off, maybe a comment and then a question. I just want my colleagues to know that sign height is defined in the bylaw, and it means the vertical height from a sign from the lowest point of the finished grade to the highest part of the sign. So if it's a hill, it's actually the lowest point of the hill up to the top of the sign. And my question for staff is, part of the reason for a new bylaw and adding things into it is to try to make it much more enforceable. And part of the changes to in the enforcement section, which is very important because in the past, the enforcement has been so slow, it hasn't really mattered if someone made a complaint. It took some time to actually have that actually acted upon. So my concern with some of the restrictions in here is not that I have really strong opinions on the restrictions or not. I quite frankly think that the 0.9 meter thing is going to mean you're going to have lots and lots and lots of enforcement to do. And is there any concern that that is going to be unmanageable, given that, you know, there's probably going to be a lot of people who break the 0.9 meter component? Like, is this been thought out in conjunction with the necessary to enforce? Because I think that that's going to be an issue.
Ms. Saunders?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, this bylaw has been reviewed and bylaw enforcement is satisfied with what is before you.
Okay, so Councillor Van Holst.
Yes, thank you very much. It seems like many of these are to help with the visibility in the sightlines. I wonder if it might be better to just say that the signs shall not obstruct the visibility, and then we could put some maybe guidelines around there. I look at the one, it can't be within 5 meters of a roadway. I think if you're driving along, I'm imagining some of the places that I put up signs, and if you're on, say, Commissioners, near the corner of King Edward, there's a big wall that runs the length of Commissioners, and it isn't, I don't think it's 5 meters from the road to the wall, so that means no signs would be able to put up there. You could put a sign right against the wall. I had one that came out of, when you're pulling out of King Edward, and you just look across the street, and there was the sign up against and parallel to the wall. But I don't think we would be able to put a sign there now, because it wasn't in that place. So I'm afraid that by putting these restrictions in, we're tying ourselves in ways that are unnecessary. Something like that, it wouldn't matter. And up against the wall, it wouldn't matter how tall the sign was. It can't interfere with visibility because nobody could see beyond the sign anyway. So I'm not convinced that these are necessarily going to work, and I wonder if there's something more straightforward. We're trying to come up with numbers that will fit every situation, and I don't know if it's possible.
Well, just if I may, I'm not sure this is the third time we've looked at this, fourth time we've looked at this. See, counting, it seems well when you think about 4 or 5 meters, but when you do the math on that and figure out 4 meters is what, just shy of 20 feet from a roadway? Like that's a long way back, and I'm not running, so knock yourselves out. But I'm running through the inventory of places that signs are commonly put, and I would have to say that most of them are out of the field of play in that sense. Most street corners, think of a Riverside and Wonderland, Oxford and Wonderland. 20 feet, you've got a sidewalk, which the engineers will tell me is 1.2 meters. Its rate, a curb face, is probably 1.8 meters. And then there's a boulevard, so do the math. It's no way that it gets anywhere close to 5 meters in that entire stretch. And that would continue all the way up Wonderland in most corners. So we've gone to, and I understand the desire to get precision, but what's the point here? What's the point of the bylaw? And the bylaw is to allow people to do campaigning with some parameters. It's to ensure that there's public safety, and also to encourage a informed electorate. Those are really the three principles. I would defer to my MPA people that might have a little bit more insight on it, but I'm a pretty simple guy. And somehow I understand the public safety element, but I'm not sure to what degree some of this is really impeding. In Councillor Van Holst's thing, we've moved away from, is it impeding visibility? And in many of those cases, we would say, you might say no, but you would say it's well within the 5 meters. And so you're going to be removing most of those signs across the city. So I'm going to turn to Ms. Corman and Ms. Saunders and say, 4 times, are we going to go back at this? I certainly hadn't been contemplating a height restriction, and I'm kind of thinking, okay, a lot of the larger signs are 30 inches. The sign itself are 30 inches, or certainly 2 by 30s is a common sign. There's no way to get a stake on it. Even if it's right on level ground, you're going to have a hard time getting a stake there. You might have a couple inches, that's it. So I'm not sure what we're trying to accomplish, and maybe someone could help me.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have other bylaws that are in place in the City of London that restrict sign placement. And one of them is the streets bylaw. So we've crafted this to be consistent with that bylaw. And, you know, there are a couple issues that we're trying to address as a result of complaints received from the public. A is the number and pollution of the number of campaign signs, and also the safety of not only traffic, but also pedestrians walking. So that is what we're focused on. We're not focused on whether it's helping or not helping someone that's campaigning. We're focusing on the complaints that were received from the public and the safety of the public.
I'm going to look to committees and say, do you have suggestions? You've heard the issues. I don't like us sort of drafting this stuff on a freewheeling basis, but any thoughts from committee on this? A motion, Councillor.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. First of all, I was just going to ask you to separate 4 because I'm not going to vote in favor of 4 here on this discussion, that little piece. And if I have to vote on it, then I'm not going to vote on this at all. The point is that you mentioned 4 feet, but it's really 5 feet and 8 feet. The 4 feet is height. The distance in from the roadway is sorry, not feet, but 5 meters and 8 meters. That's an awful long way, especially when there's no boulevard and there's no sidewalk.
So the clerk, if I may be helpful, the clerk has informed we can't separate it. So if you want something taken out, a motion to refer it back to remove part X would be appropriate. That's the only way to get it done that way. You could pass a motion to amend it on the floor here, and then it would go, a revised bylaw would go to council. So if you want to do that, I'll take that motion to remove the height restriction.
Yeah. But, Mr. Chair, I really want to, it's the height restriction and the, what do you call it, the placement.
Yeah.
Back from the road.
So we're going to do this piece by piece. So if you want to, part A would be removing the height restriction.
Yeah.
Part B would say, I'm not comfortable with the 5 meters, I'm comfortable with 3 meters. Or 4 meters, or whatever it happens to be.
So, Mr. Chair, I would like to remove the height restriction. That's the easiest way from my perspective. And then with respect to the back from the road, it just seemed to me that there should be something when you have a sidewalk and something when there's no sidewalk. Because I don't think that you could use the same parameters for a roadway that doesn't have sidewalks. Most roadways with the sidewalks, they have a boulevard, then they've got the sidewalk, and then they have so much. So it seems to me that the distance should be from the sidewalk, but no signs on boulevard. And that's what I'm concerned with. If we could talk about the roadway and we could talk about the sidewalk, then I would certainly prefer to have this something like 3 feet and 6 feet, or 3 feet and 5 feet.
Well, we're dealing with meters.
Sorry, I meant meters, 3 meters and 5 meters.
The challenge is there's too many variations in roadway configurations, and I think that's why we're trying to get something fixed from the roadway, because the roadway is kind of the consistent thing, whereas you've got boulevards and sidewalks, you've got sidewalks that are curb face. So I think we have some discretion. I'm going to go to Councillor Park.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that we have to remind ourselves of why we started down this path. It was to clear a lot of the clutter that happens at election time and to make sure it's in a safe way. Hearing the remarks of staff that this is more in line with our other sign bylaws, I'm full in support of going forward with this today. As you've said a few times, this is our 3rd kick at the cat here. Let's get it done so we're up and ready. 4th kick at the cat, pardon me. So let's just get up and running on this.
I'm going to see if there's a seconder for Councillor Usher's amendment on height. It's to take the height restriction of 0.9 out of the, and then to bring a modified bylaw back to committee, or council rather. Is there a seconder for that? Is there a seconder for that? I'm going to second it then. So I'll go with the 5, but not with the 0.9. So, okay. So I'm going to call that question just to clear the deck on it, yay or nay. And I think we may be split on this. So if I may, let's just call the question on that.
Motion to remove the height restriction in its entirety?
Yes. I'll just clarify. Councillor, is there a height that you're more comfortable with?
Well,
I would remind you that there was a former that had signs that were something like 6 feet high.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of 1.2 meters or 1.25 meters or 1.3 meters, something like that.
Okay, so if I could be helpful, can we amend it to 1.2?
Yeah.
Okay, since we're not getting too scientific on the number. Okay, so amend it to, yes, Councillor.
I would like to know what our staff feel about the changes we're making, because they've obviously been looking into this for some time. I think I would like to hear them weigh in on the number that we're talking about.
Through Mr. Chair, from a staff perspective, we're concerned with the recommended changes. The basis of the bylaw, there's still a section that requires us to enforce the bylaw where there's a safety concern. If you're passing amendments that would bring us in violation of another bylaw and it's deemed to be unsafe, we're still going to be removing the signs. So I think respectfully, you're putting us in an even more difficult implementation enforcement perspective without the restrictions that we've placed. And if Mr. Soto could add from his perspective, from a road safety perspective.
Thank you to the chair, to the committee. In terms of road safety, it's not only the intersections we're looking at, but if you're in a driveway and you're a driver that is leaving a driveway, having signs obstructing your view up or down stream of traffic flow is a problem. The 0.9 comes, that's the average height of eye level of a driver in a car. So if you're putting now signs that are higher than that, they cannot see down the road. The reason we have 0 to 5 is the average length of a car. So again, it's all about clearing those obstructions along the right of way, not only at intersections, but also at driveways.
Okay. Councillor Van Hulst.
Thank you very much. A question through you to staff. The other bylaw that was mentioned for signs, were those for permanent signs or those for also for temporary signs?
Through the chair to the council, that's for any obstructions in the right of way.
So that's hedges or anything that would be in the right of way.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for that. You know, just what I know of constituents, if somebody were to call me and say there's too many signs and they're not safe, I would interpret that as being there's too many signs. And then the safety is something to sort of back up that. You know, again, on, with the 0.9, it kind of depends on how you orient the sign too. That would, if a sign is perpendicular to the driveway, then it's not really gonna be, obstructing the vision. Whereas, if it's parallel to driveway, then it could. So I think we're back to the point where, is the point, they shouldn't be obstructing vision. And, can we go with something like that? Actually, the spirit of the law, rather than try to create many letters that, I don't think, would be a problem. So I believe whatever you come up with, I could show you instances where this in fact is not at all unsafe. And so there's the trouble.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor. I'm gonna call the motion, okay? Yeah, I think we've had enough. We see where the ups and the downs are.
Is Josh still seconding?
No, I was seconding it.
You're seconding, sorry. Yes.
I'll call the question.
Motion loses on a tie vote.
Okay, so as the motion is, what we have before us, could I have a motion on that?
I have more to do.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I'd like to debate this one.
Okay.
Okay, so I'd like to debate this more. I asked some questions initially. I listened to some stuff. We had a motion. I didn't support that. A couple of times it's been brought up, what is the point of what we're trying to do here? And I want to start off by commending our staff for trying to deal with the directions we gave them in a very effective way. I know I gave some of those directions on concerns for safety at intersections. And I know we talked about triangles and math and things like that. And I appreciate the solutions that you've been trying to deploy here. I also appreciate the concern for safety along our roadways and the difficult situation of wanting to have a sign below where people look, but the whole point of a sign is to have them where people look to make them effective. And so there's a balance here. And that balance is between making sure that our roads are safe and fair and the election is going to be in a position where people can compete, fairly. With the idea that the public gets annoyed by signs and there's lots of them, and they can be cluttered and ineffective and create issues in intersections. But for me, the concern that I have with the direction we're going, which is small pieces over time, over 4 meetings, is that I can support a number of these changes. In fact, I can say that you've convinced me on the dates that we could go with a shorter time frame. Most people don't put up signs outside of the time frame we were talking about before, and we'd be in line with most other municipalities. What makes me not supportive of this in its current iteration is that the shortened time frame, in addition with the restrictions on the number of signs, in addition with the restriction on height, in addition with the restriction and expansion of where the roadway is starting to create a situation where you can't really put signs in very many spots. And there's got to be a balance between not having signs everywhere and signs nowhere. And I don't know where this lands. And what I don't want to be in is in a situation where I vote for something and we're creating a disadvantage to anybody who's trying to get name recognition out there who maybe isn't an incumbent and wants to put up signs. And let's be honest, signs are effective for getting name recognition out there, and it's important for people who aren't incumbents and don't have name recognition to have that opportunity. So where the balance lies has to be fair and reasonable. And what I have trouble reading into with the current iteration of the bylaw is where are we actually going to be putting enough signs that someone can make a good go of getting their name out there effectively while maintaining the concerns that we have. So what I am supportive of is the changes at the intersections. I'm not really supportive of the 5 meters. I think that wipes out way too many locations across the city. It used to be 3. I don't know why it still isn't reasonable outside of intersections. I know we've defined intersections at 20 meters with other bylaws to do with putting up, no parking signage. So maybe an intersection can be defined as 20 meters and you have that additional restrictions in the intersection, but you go back to 3 along the roadways. I can be fine with the changes to the timeframes. I think that that's something the public has wanted. It seems to be in line with other municipalities. But I just can't vote for all of these things pieced together, which is why I have difficulty voting for, Councillor Usher's motion. I could be supportive of the increase in height, but it's really for me about ensuring that the heart of what we're trying to do is ensuring an enforceable bylaw that is fair to those who want to participate in an election, to give them the opportunity to get their name recognition out, and share with the public that they're running. And so it can't be nowhere, it can't be everywhere. This to me looks
So
more,
what would you like to do?
this to me looks closer like nowhere.
So what would you like to do, Councillor?
Well, I don't want to send it back again, without us being very clear. So what I think we should start to debate, and I'd like to hear my colleagues, what they think about, and our staff, what they think about leaving the strong restrictions at intersections, defining where an intersection starts, going back to 3 meters elsewhere. And I'm open to some discussion on the height in those areas that are outside of those areas that we're calling our safety zones, or, outside of the 3 meters along roadways. I could go for a higher height if that's going to be fine with our staff. So that's where I land, and I just want my colleagues to know, so that when I'm voting on the whole thing, and we can piece this together, but I'd really like to hear what you think about some of these pieces.
Councillor Park.
Thank you. Hearing some of the comments, I think it's important to recognize that roadways are longer and wider than just a mere intersection. I hear the parts about making sure that people have good opportunities to get their names out there. But it all comes back to roadway safety, and we've heard very clearly why the recommendation came forward as it was. And it was based on a lot of commentary that we had made at this very committee 4 meetings in a row, maybe. So again, I'm on board with the staff recommendation here, and it does, in my mind, give people opportunities to get their names out there, and it keeps people safe at the very same time. So again, I'll move this recommendation when I'm able to.
Okay, the councillor's going to move it, so I'll be looking for a seconder. Councillor Usher.
Well, Mr. Chair, I'm not going to vote on number 4 because I think that this is way out from what we used to do and what we need. I do agree with the 3 meters from the roadway and maybe 8 meters from the roadway is way back. And I'm sure that there are houses that are less than 8 meters from the roadway. So what are you going to do? Put them inside the windows and not allow people to put them on the lawn? I think that these numbers of the 5 meters and 8 meters need to be re-examined. I do respect where staff is coming from with the bylaws, but this is just for election purposes. And people need to be able to, if we have to encourage people to run for election, and we have to give them an opportunity. I'm not saying that they should come. I hate signs that are too close to the roadway in the first place. But so long as it does not interfere with the line of sight for people driving or people walking, interfering with the signs, 3 meters is good enough, I think, from roadway. And the biggest signs, 5 meters maybe. So I have a hard time voting in favor of number 4.
Well, part of the problem is I can't just take out bits and pieces, and I think Councillor Morgan raises a good point. We need to give some clear directions, but I'm not sure we're going to be able to hash it out on the floor, to be honest with you. I hate to do it to our staff yet again, but there's some real clarity of what is clear is that people are not comfortable with what we have here. Clerk.
Through Mr. Chair, just in case there's confusion, this only applies to private or public properties. So if someone was placing a sign within 5 meters of the roadway and that property was private property, this would not apply.
So my question to you would be, Mr. Soldo, from the center of the roadway, how far back is public property? Because we own the road allowance, and that's public property.
This bylaw only applies to the right-of-way itself. So as the clerk has indicated, if it's on private property, this does not apply. The width of the roadway varies across the entire city. We have right-of-ways that are 16 meters wide, 20 meters wide, 50 meters wide. So what we're trying to do is only deal with signs on public property through this bylaw. So the example again, if your private property is 4 meters behind the curb or the edge of the right-of-way, the sign bylaw would not apply. You can put a sign in that location.
Okay.
Thank you. I have concern about this going back again, because it feels like every time we've discussed it, there's been a new issue each and every meeting. So I'm going to express some frustration on that. And if colleagues have other concerns, today's the day to get it done and over with, as far as I'm concerned. As I said, I'm quite frustrated with this. Recognizing the comments that Mr. Soldo made, I think that that would put to bed a lot of the concerns that's been raised with regarding the road allowances and those sorts of things. So again, if you got other stuff today, people, please bring it forward.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is new issues have emerged each time. So the height one wasn't here the first few times. None of us anticipated that. So that's the issue. Councillor Morgan, do you have any suggestions of what you want to do here? Because I'm trying to get some consensus.
Yes, I would like to hear what our staff think about the 3 meters outside of intersections, and because it used to be that way before, and I want some feedback on that.
Staff want to comment on the 3 meter from roadway?
Just before Mr. Soldo responds, if I could clarify, the reason that we've gone to the height and the 5 meters is to address the concern that councillors had raised about their volunteers going out into the intersection to measure. So although the height is new, it was put in to assist with the addressing of the ease for the volunteers and ensure that no one is putting themselves in any harm's way by going out into the intersection to measure our previous definition of the site triangle.
So I understand that in the intersection, which is why I said I was supportive of the restrictions in the intersection. I don't understand, and I apologize for not understanding how height it makes volunteers go out on the roadway to determine. I understand the distance measuring, but I don't understand the height part.
Through the chair to the councillor, if I just go back to, I guess, first principles here. 0 to 5, there's no height allowed at all. There's no signs in 0 to 5. From 5 to 8, there's a height restriction there of 0.9. And again, that is related to the height of a driver at eye level in a car. So you can see. So if you're coming up onto the sidewalk, you're coming out of your driveway, you know, there could be a child going on the sidewalk, going across. You want to be able to see down the roadway and notice them there. From 0 to 5, there's no signs at all, because there you want to be able to see in both directions clearly.
Okay, there you have it, Councillor.
Okay, so it wasn't safe before when we had 3 as a restriction in the bylaw. We're correcting that? Is that what we're saying? I just want to know why we changed from 3 to 5. If that's the answer, then say it wasn't safe before, it's safe now. This is going to be better.
Through the chair to the councillor, goes back to the streets bylaw. The street bylaw has no obstructions in the right of way. In terms of, previously you had talked about intersections and how they get measured. Realistically, if you were to say what is a site triangle at intersection, it's much larger than 0 to 5 having no. So that's why we stepped it back. We have a 2-tier approach, 0 to 5 nothing, and then from 5 to 8 the 0.9. That was a bit of a tiered approach, so we can still have a proper site triangle at intersections.
Councillor Morgan, anything further?
Nope, that was the answer to my question.
Okay, Councillor Usher.
I just want to get something straight, because I hear Mr. Soldo keep talking about intersection. And it almost sounds as though he's saying that this applies only to intersection. Can I get that straight? Because I was not thinking, when I was talking, I was not thinking of intersection with this.
It's roadways, right, Mr. Soldo?
Through the chair to council, that's correct. This is to ensure safety along the entire right of way.
So, thank you very much. So I picture the street I live on, for example, just as an example. And I picture a sign going 5 meters from the roadway, and it's way back. The signs that we generally put up on our street is generally about 2 meters, I think it was 2 or 3 meters from the sidewalk. Those are the big signs. The smaller signs we put a little closer. But those have sidewalks and boulevard. And I'm thinking that a place without sidewalk, to put it 5 meters back is pretty far. And most of those places, they have some of them are way in, and that's fine because it's open space, but some of them are not. They come much closer, and it's not open space. And that's my calamity here with respect to the signs. But I'm not going to go with the height address the height already. So I'm just concerned about the distance from the road and from the sidewalk and so on.
Mr. Soldo?
Through the chair to Councillor, I'll try to use an example. In a local neighborhood, the majority of property lines are less than 5 meters back from the right of way. So in that case, those signs would be on private property. This sign law bylaw would not apply. It only applies to the public portion of the right of way.
Okay. Okay, so are we putting the current on, or is there any changes that anyone would like? Councillor, you were going to move it, right? Councillor Park is moving the staff recommendation.
I think Councillor Usher wanted to change it to 92 days, right, from the 72 to 96 days, I should say. Or hours.
Oh, Councillor Usher, did you want to change the number of days as well?
Oh, yeah. I wanted to change the 72 hours to 96 hours.
Yeah, okay. Let's deal with that item and vote on that, and then we'll see where we end up, okay? So Councillor Usher's going to move that. Is there a seconder for that? There's a seconder. Okay, there's a seconder for that.
Josh, is it okay? Should I just blend it in and then we can do it in one fell swoop?
No, I want to do it separately. So I'm not okay with it. Go ahead, Councillor, you can move that. Seconded by Councillor Park. I'm going to call the question on that. All in favor?
Motion carries 3-1.
I thought it might go that way. So we'll put the staff recommendation with that amendment on, requesting that a revised bylaw come back. Councillor, I can't separate out this height in the bylaw. I'm sorry? So be requesting that a revised bylaw come back to council.
We will put it with my report.
It'll go with the report, yeah. Okay. I'll call the question. There is a wind advisory. High wind advisory. So I'll call the question.
Is this with the revision?
Yes.
Motion carries 3-1.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to the tax adjustment agenda, and I just need to confer with the clerk for a minute. So I'll have a motion to open the public participation meeting. I think you guys are okay to vote on opening the public participation meeting, okay? We're dealing with item number 3, the tax adjustment agenda. Second that, please.
Motion carries 4-0.
Okay, so this is public participation on the tax adjustment agenda. I'm looking for any speakers. Any speakers to the tax agenda? Going once, going twice. Seeing none, I'll take a motion to close the public participation meeting. Seconder, please. And I'll call the question on that.
Carries 4-0.
Okay, so now I'll enter into debate and we can go to the staff recommendation. I'll do it this way. We'll call everything with save and accept the two conflicts that counselors have, and then I'll call those ones separately, okay? Okay, I'll call the question. This is on with two exceptions.
Motion carries 4-0.
So we'll put the item that was Councillor Park's conflict on. Seconder, please. I'll call the question on application 217-14.
Carries 3 with 1 recuse.
And now on item 2016-123. And I'll call the question on that.
Carries 3 with 1 recuse.
Okay, folks, if we could move to item number 5. And this is the amendment to the use of corporate resources, City of London resources for municipal election purposes. This is the clerk bringing back some amendments from the last time, if I'm not mistaken, clerk, is that right? And you'll see sort of a red line version there on page 55. I'll look to committee. Councillor Usher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to know if contract assistance is included on page 57 on Appendix A, and if where it should be, because I think it should be included. Would that automatically be considered under city staff?
Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, contract assistance would be included as a corporate resource as they're being paid by corporate funds.
Just want to be sure we don't miss it. Thank you.
Okay. Anything further on this matter? I'll take a motion. Seconder, please. Call the question.
Motion carries 3-1.
Okay, if we can move to item number 6, which is I Heart Beer Holiday Festival. Just for information, it's on November 25th. It's a holiday drink festival promoting local beer, cider, and spirits at the Convention Center.
If I may, if it's helpful to the committee, I know there's been previous questions about organizations and what they do. I can tell you that they've had similar festivals in Guelph, Mississauga, and Toronto. It's a trend happening throughout the province. Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
Well, I'm not confident. I think we've covered all classes of spirits. In the spirit of the season, let's go to deferred matters. Item number 7. Sorry?
No, not yet. That's at 1:30.
Oh, it's at 1:30, Counselor. Periodically, the chair knows what he's doing. Okay, we're going to any issues on the deferred matters list at this time. Councillor Usher.
In item 1.16, I wonder if we could make that a little bit more complete so that when we read it, we know what we're talking about. I believe that this has to do with the diverse voices for change. And when I read it, I couldn't pick that up. And I'm almost sure it is, but so if it is, I just like the diverse voices for change, even as DV4C. Mention it as.
So this is 1.16. I'm looking to Mr. Hayward. Is that accurate?
Yes, it is.
Can we amend the language in the deferred list to more clearly reflect that? That'd be okay?
No problem.
Any other questions on the deferred? Yep, Councillor.
I'm sure Mr. Coxon can respond to this. It's 1.12 through you, Mr. Chair. Is this information hopefully will it include the any information that directly related to it based on how should I say demographics, which should come out from the Statistics Canada, I believe, tomorrow? If it does come out, I'm talking about.
Mr. Coxhead.
Yes, through the chair. Our intention is to, we're waiting for the results, for the London results from the Canadian Census to include in the report. We have the reports being drafted as we speak, so we thought that was pertinent information relative to what the community looks like in the most recent census. And so we'll be providing that information in our report. I believe we're coming at in mid to end of November with this, and so we're on track to do that.
And my last one is, sorry, my last one is to do with 1.14. It says that the Cycling Advisory Committee, so what does this, why is this here? Is this because City Clerk's office will have something to do with this to find a way of recognizing Mr. Kettler.
Through the chair, yes, that's the case. And in fact, I can report that you'll be seeing something come back at the next CSC meeting on this matter.
Thank you.
I have one. If
Sure, I have one, the one that involves me, in 1.1, or 1.3. I'm unsure if this is actually necessary anymore, given council's other direction to task the governance working group with investigating ranked ballots system. And so unless the clerk wants to correct me, I don't intend on, I don't see I certainly will intend on reporting back should the committee compel me to, but given that the work is being done at the governance working group, given that there's been a demo of some of the technology that Councillor Van Holst has put together, and given the direction there, I'm unsure on whether that component is actually necessary, since it will be reported back through SPPC through the governance working group. So maybe the clerk can comment on that, and we can dispose of that one if the committee feels it's relevant or warranted, sorry.
Clerk?
Through Mr. Chair, yes, it is a duplicate of what is going to be coming forward to governance working group, and part of the amendments to the advisory committee policy will also incorporate the use of ranked ballots as part of that. So it's all incorporated into the same thing. So it is a duplicate.
So you can move to remove it. I'll take that motion.
Motion carries 4-0.
If I may just ask Ms. Barbone about the procurement one, 1.13, and if we're making progress on that. I know it was just here in terms of just opening the doors up to small businesses and particularly locally.
Through the chair, we're working on that report now and anticipate to have that back in December.
Mr. Collins, are you the lead on that? Are you? Okay, terrific. It'll be outstanding. Okay, I'll take a motion to receive the deferred list. Call the question.
Motion carries 4-0.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we now have a timed item, and it's exactly 1:30. And it's a complaints hearing that we are operating under as we'll be changing our format slightly under the Development Charges Act. And the clerk has graciously prepared a script for me. So I'll walk us through this now, and I'll be looking for a mover and a seconder for the following motion that the secretary will now read.
Thank you, Chair. That the Corporate Services Committee now convene as a tribunal under Section 27 of Part 4 of Bylaw CP-1496-244 to hear a complaint under Section 20 of the Development Charges Act 1997 and provide the complainant an opportunity to make representations.
So if I could have a mover and seconder. I'll call the question.
Motion carries 4-0.
Okay, thank you very much. This is now a hearing of a complaint made by the Junction Climbing Center, Inc. under Part 4 of Bylaw CP 1496-244 as amended. The development charges bylaw in respect to the development charge imposed by the Corporation of the City of London in connection with development on the land known as 1030 Elias Street. So I'll look for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. I see none. Who is representing the complainant?
I am, sir. Alan Patton, a lawyer for the Junction Climbing Center.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Patton. Who's representing Civic Administration and the corporation?
Barry Card, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Card. Also, I'll advise Corporate Services Committee and any parties to the hearing that the lawyer from the City Solicitor's Office is here to answer legal questions of the Corporate Services Committee, should we need that to be provided to us. Okay? The hearing shall be conducted as follows. I need to read all this, right?
I can if you don't want to.
I can read it. The hearing will be conducted as follows. Certain documents will be identified for the record. The Corporate Services Committee will hear any oral evidence, receive any further documents, and hear any submissions on the matter in public session. The order of the proceeding is as follows. The complainant first, Civic Administration second, then the complainant responding to any new issue that raised by Civic Administration. No party to the hearing may cross-examine or question the other party on either any written document or oral evidence. The city clerk, acting as a registrar for the Corporate Services Committee, will keep a written record of the hearing. The Corporate Services Committee may decide by resolution to go in camera to receive legal advice. Neither the complainant nor Civic Administration, except the city clerk acting as registrar for the Corporate Services Committee, may be in the hearing room if the Corporate Services Committee receives legal advice in camera. I'm going to ask a clarifying question in just 1 minute. If the Corporate Services Committee goes in camera to receive legal advice, it will reconvene in public to deliberate the merits of the complaint and make its recommendation. After hearing the evidence and submissions, Corporate Services Committee will either adjourn the hearing, make a recommendation with reasons to Municipal Council on the merits of the complaint, and Municipal Council will make the final decision on the complaint under Section 33 of the bylaw. That is, the Municipal Council may dismiss the complaint or rectify any incorrect determination or error that was subject. Mr. Card, if I may, are you acting as solicitor for the corporation? In other words, if we were going in camera, would you be speaking to us?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, staff will be presenting the response to the complaint. I won't be taking an active role in the response on the city's behalf. I will be available to the committee if the committee requires advice in camera. I'm sorry, I should have represented the fact that I was here on behalf of the municipality to provide advice to the committee rather than appearing on behalf of staff in response.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I assume just by the movement in the back row behind you that Mr. Kokoris will be presenting. Almost feels like Sunday afternoon football, doesn't it? There's movement in the backfield. So, okay. Yes, sir.
Can we have that identified, because Mr. Card stood up and Mr. Kokoris also stood up? Could we?
I just did.
I know
Mr.
you said it,
Kokoris will
but-
be presenting on behalf of the administration. Mr. Card is here in his capacity as the solicitor for the corporation. Okay, so I'm now to ask the clerk to identify and mark any of the following documents for the record. A notice of hearing as Exhibit 1, a notice of complaint as Exhibit 2, and a report of civic administration, if any, responding to the written complaint as Exhibit 3.
I do have those.
Okay? You have those?
I do.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so we'll now turn to the representative of the complainant, Mr. Patton, to identify any written documents that is relying upon in addition to the exhibit number 2, which is your written complaint, sir, and provide copies of those additional documents to the Corporate Services Committee, which shall then be entered by the clerk into record and numbered as exhibits, and provide your oral evidence, if any, and make your submissions. And committee, for your reference, when Mr. Patton is complete, you will have the opportunity to ask any questions that you may want to ask. Okay? Mr. Patton?
What I have, first of all, Mr. Kudelka is that good-looking gentleman there. He's going to make his presentation as the principal of Junction Climbing Center. There is, however, and I would introduce it now, or I believe the most appropriate time is following Mr. Kudelka's submissions to you. There is a resolution of council that I believe is precedent for this matter. It's a resolution of council of September 16, 2014, where they granted the reduction in the development charges. I think if you hear from Mr. Kudelka, the arguments are basically the same, but I can provide you with the precedent now or when I make my final submissions.
I think it might be good to hear from him.
Yep.
And then hear from you, and we'll receive your submission at that time.
Will be brief.
That works for me.
All right, thank you.
Welcome, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you. And thank you for your time today. For those of you unfamiliar with the Junction, we are an indoor rock climbing gym in the East Village. Our story begins in 2011 when we set in motion plans to open a climbing gym here in London. At the time, London was the largest market in Ontario without a climbing gym. It seemed a straightforward business choice until we quickly learned why London lagged behind so many jurisdictions. Development charges for converting industrial space to commercial uses were astronomical, $174.44 per square meter. We eventually opened just a portion of our planned facility. Even then, it cost just shy of $112,000 to convert 641 square meter, or about 7,000 square foot space, of empty warehouse from industrial to commercial use. But for us to open, we were stuck paying it. Commercial properties with the height required for a climbing gym simply do not exist. It would have to be an industrial building if we were to open. Paying it was an incredible strain on our budget, and one that was especially tough to swallow as the new development was in a 15-year-old building in a 150-year-old neighborhood. Still, we believed London was the right place to open and believed that council would see a way to charge fees that more accurately reflected the use and demand on city resources. And the council of the day, one that was notorious for being split along ideologies and alliances, united around a sensible approach. In a vote that went 10-3, they agreed that charges at our property were not calculated correctly. The correct calculation should be on the bathrooms and utility rooms we had built. Each of these rooms had water fixtures connected to city services constituting new demand. The climbing areas, while certainly impressive to look at, were fundamentally no different than any factory with added equipment. Now, 3 years later, we've been able to finish the project we designed in 2013 and 14. Again, we are facing development charges, this time for a mezzanine space that provides exclusively climbing. The fees for this space, the presence of which places no additional demands on city services, are $74,456.44. This is almost 25% of our budget for the project, and actually costs more than the concrete floor we installed. Our belief is that these charges were not calculated correctly, that they should have been charged as we were before, on the addition of internal space featuring the fixtures which increase water demand. This area represents 98.7 square meters, making fees $23,478.76. I'm sure you'll have concerns about the precedent this may set. I believe the record will show it's rare that intensification on this scale will occur inside an established building. After all, not many buildings are 4 stories tall, but still empty on the inside. Additionally, I would add that charging recreation spaces on a per square foot basis creates a very difficult situation for us operators. It creates a financial pressure to reduce space to save cost, and as a result can compromise safety, not to mention user experience. There will be 5 pages provided for your reference. The first shows the resolution of council as it was done in 2014. The second will show the area we were originally charged on. The next page, what we were charged on after the resolution. The next 2 pages show the current area of charge, and the last page shows what we, based on that precedent, should be charged. I do not object to paying city taxes or fees. I do, however, believe the application of the charges is currently inaccurate, and that a calculation based on the precedent set for our use is correct, and that it will better serve the city in its goal of developing the East Village and the city as a whole into a thriving, healthy, and connected community. Thank you and the staff for your time in considering this matter, and we'll happily answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. I think it might be good if we could hear from Mr. Patton, and then we'll ask our questions, because it's really one presentation.
Thank you. What I would like to distribute, because it's not in the material that you've been provided with, is the council resolution of September 16th, 2014. So I'll just take you through the council resolution of September 16th. And this is sadly the second time that Mr. Kadalka and his business has had to deal with development charges and that we feel are inappropriate. And you'll see from the resolution of council that after a hearing similar to this, council resolved that the development charges be in the amount of $14,373.86 be approved, subject to any necessary adjustment arising from confirmation by the city in order to rectify an incorrect determination or error based on the newly developed floor area. So the issue there was there any new floor area added in the phase 1, the first phase, to the climbing junction. So what happened was that the finding of council based upon the evidence of whether there's an inequity here and that development charges are not warranted is $111,816.04 of Mr. Kadalka's money was paid under protest. And that was for a newly developed floor area, of which the dimensions, 90 square meters in size, and in brackets, it gives you the dimensions that add up to the 90 square meters, which is, and then the original charges, including interest, was the development charges returned, whereas $15,751.93. So Mr. Kadalka received a refund of over $96,000. And that dealt with the phase 1 of the project. Now, if you turn to your agenda for today's proceedings, you'll see on page 53 what's labeled as Appendix C. And that's in the darker outline, but the rectangular square beneath that is the main floor area. that was the subject of the activities of the climbing center at that time. What's before you and for which there was the reduction in development charges. I see some quizzical looks if you're confused by that.
Maybe I can be helpful, Mr. Patton. The handouts that we just received, the package, has some pages that have some color shading on it. I hate to say it, but the photocopies that we get in our agenda are muddied at best. Are you familiar with this drawing? Is this what you're referring to? Yeah, I realize that, but is this the same thing as we're seeing here?
It is.
And that might be clearer because we have the color version of it. So if you could direct us through these submissions, it might be clearer for everybody.
Well, what you have is the area that's colored, I didn't get a strawberry or something.
Fuchsia.
Fuchsia. You don't put that on the. I don't want to be quoted with Councillor as saying a fuchsia, one of my favorite colors.
Can't believe I made you blush.
It's pretty easy. I'm so thin-skinned. So the first floor is what's included in Appendix C in the lighter tone. What is heavily, what has the darker border is the mezzanine level, okay? So what happens on the mezzanine level is not really activity space. That's the problem. There is a mezzanine level up there, but there is an activity space, I apologize. What happens up there is an additional washroom, a party room, and a maintenance room, and that occupies the 880. No, I read from the council resolution, sorry. What happens on the?
Yeah, sorry, my lawyer is not a climber, so I'll just clarify.
I keep my feet firmly on the ground.
The area in red is on page 3 of the one I provided, is the area we are currently being charged on. That area was added to be additional climbing space. The development charges are on that additional mezzanine space. The area in green on the last page of what I provided is underneath that space. It was new construction as well, and we believe that is what we should be charged on based on the precedent. That is area that has the whole understanding of development charges is to reflect a decreased demand on city services, and we are happy paying for the areas where we increase demand, but to charge us for empty concrete, or what could fundamentally be returned to empty concrete when we were not charged for empty concrete before, feels inaccurate.
Okay. Anything further, Mr. Pat?
I would add, the word I would use is not inaccurate, but inequitable and inconsistent with the decision of the previous council. Now, certainly you're not bound by that, but the principle was fairly well established that one colored area has no impact on municipal services. Subject to any questions you may have of myself or Mr. Kadalka, that's it in.
Okay, thank you. There is a couple of questions. Councillor Park.
Sorry.
Thank you. Brief question, were all of these works completed on one permit?
All of the areas, yes. Sorry, to clarify, the original permit, like their washrooms that are there, had a ceiling. We built a new ceiling and they joined. So maybe they were two permits depending on your point of view, but that additional ceiling was kind of within the new permit. It went from a ceiling to a floor, I guess.
Other questions? If I may, okay? Because we kind of got a little chopped. So I'm staying with the 5-page submissions that we have here. 2014 pink area was what the original charges were based on. Next page has a green area in our submission. That was the area that the charges were applied to in the revision in the council resolution of October 24th, 2014. Am I correct? Okay, so fast forward to 2017, the DCs are being applied on the now larger pink area, kind of a little bit of two sections there. And you're asking us, your request is that based on the 2014 precedent, we would apply it to the green area on the final page of our submission. Have I got it?
That is correct.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't have any further questions. Committee, any further questions for these folks? Councillor Usher.
Well, just for my clarity, I'm on the 2017 current and based on the 2014, those 2 pages. What I don't understand is this pink area is built, done, it's sitting there. Am I right? So, and then what happened, I see a lot of washrooms on the next one, but you're only greening portion of it. Was the other part done already? It's not being done? I'm trying to get my relationship to those 2 pages. You understand what I'm saying? I see this pink page, then I see this green. I'm trying to relate them. This is on top, this is existing, the pink, the floor, and it's got a roof.
He needs to answer for Mike.
Sorry.
He wants to answer for Mike.
Oh, sorry.
In the space, there are 2 levels. There's the lower level has the washrooms, and the upper area is the mezzanine where we added climbing on a new floor. And then it's just climbing. The lower level was not charged on under the current DC bylaw. We were, however, charged on the upper level because of the way DCs are calculated based on existing footprints, and I'm sure city staff will be happy to clarify the exact nature of those charges. So while we were very happy to not be charged on the lower level, we were charged, we think the charges for the upper level are inaccurate, that the precedent should be we were charged for the bathrooms and washrooms as we were before. The pink second floor, which is essentially empty, you know, it's got climbing, but it's not got any demand on city services, is what we were charged on based on the way the bylaw is structured, and that resulted in a $75,000 charge to use space inside our own building. Empty space. It would just be ceiling above us. But now it's 2 floors you're looking at, an upper level that we got charged on and a lower level that we think was where the charge should have laid.
Okay, help me out one more time. I'm going to 3 pages now. So I've got this in 2014, which you're implying that you've already paid for. And then I have this, which includes part of that, but probably only the ceiling. And then I have this, which is what you want to do. And we are charging this, the city is charging you for this, but you feel it's only this because you've already paid for this portion. Is that what you're telling me?
We're operating under 2 bylaws. The bylaw changed, and unfortunately, I believe it was in 2015 or 16, but I don't know the date. Under the old bylaw, it was entirely on the footprint of your building. And for commercial users, the footprint of a building can be massive because we operate volleyball and tennis and all kinds of recreational users were being turned away from London because they couldn't afford the space to convert an industrial building. We forged ahead. Council saw the merits in what we were doing and said for this situation, the correct calculation, because for a recreational user, the building doesn't change a lot. You add washrooms, but the rest of it stays as a warehouse. And so we got charged for the water features, the new things we built inside. Now, they're charging us on additional floor plans, as though we built an addition on the building. If we built a new space outside, if you build any new concrete thing outside, there are development charges. But our unique situation is this space is inside our building. And this space is, the rate for that is, for commercial use like we are, is astronomical. It's $75,000 for this space that we own. And so our belief is that the precedent set by council in 2014 was that the appropriate way to charge this space is based on the washrooms we installed, but they are not part of the new bylaw calculations, so we were not charged them. So we were asking that council charge us in 2017, as they saw made sense in 2014, that they accurately charged based on this new rooms. If we took all our climbing walls out, you'd have a warehouse again. You'd have empty concrete floor. We haven't built a house. You wouldn't need to demo anything to change it back to being a storage.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
I'd like to go to our civic administration. I have one final question. The mezzanine, did the mezzanine exist prior to the second phase? In other words, was there a floor there?
The ceiling was there for the bathrooms, as seems prudent, but there was not. The mezzanine we built a concrete ceiling over the bathrooms with the hope that one day we would be able to expand, because we were doing 20-foot spans. Whether you do it was too far for, we use concrete as a way of spanning that to create the open space. The mezzanine in the additional space did not exist. It was not built. The bathrooms had a ceiling, which was not used as a mezzanine. It was just a ceiling. Does that make sense? There was a ceiling there, but we weren't walking on it. We weren't using it.
All right, thank you. Mr. Kokoris? So if you could identify any documents that you're relying on, and in addition to Exhibit 3 in your report, and provide us copies of them that will be entered into the clerk, and we'll hear your oral evidence and make any submissions on the complaint.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're here this afternoon to address a complaint received on behalf of the owner of the Junction Climbing Center, Incorporated, operating at 1030 Elias Street. The complaint has been filed pursuant to Section 28 of Development Charges Bylaw CP 1496-244 and pertains to the imposition of development charges. As a bit of background information, we're going back to 2014 when the JCC applied for and obtained a building permit to convert part of a former industrial building to commercial use. That permit was issued on April 25th, 2014. On November 28th, 2016, the JCC applied for a new building permit to construct a mezzanine at the same location. The mezzanine's area is 313 square meters. So that's approximately 3,400 square feet. And that building permit was issued on March 17th, 2017. Under the Development Charges Bylaw, the mezzanine is considered as non-residential space. The mezzanine comprises 49% of the JCC's floor area, and with respect to the Ontario Building Code, it's considered a story when calculating the building's height. This is evident on the documents prepared by the owner's architect, which were submitted in support of the permit application, in that it is shown as a new second floor. Staff, in accordance with the DC bylaw, applied the commercial DC rate to this newly created non-residential space and calculated that amount to be $456.44. This was paid in full by the owner under protest. On May 29th, 2017, the city received a letter from Patent Law representing the JCC with the following grounds of complaint. The amount of the charge is excessive and unreasonable. The amount of the charge does not relate or correspond in any reasonable, fair, or equitable manner to the impact upon city services. The amount of the charge is inconsistent with previously imposed development charges on the redevelopment of the property and the use contained therein. The amount of development charge must correspond fairly and equitably to the impact on municipal services. And last, such further and other reasons as council may advise. With respect to complaints, the DC bylaw under Section 28 provides the following 3 grounds. The amount of the development charge was incorrectly determined. Whether a credit is available to be used against the development charge, or the amount of the credit or the service with respect to which the credit was given was incorrectly determined, or there was an error in the application of this bylaw. The letter of complaint received from Patent Law does not refer to any of these grounds. So it's important to ask the question, are development charges payable in this particular case? Part 2, Section 4 of the bylaw states, the owner of any land in the City of London who develops or redevelops the land or any building or structure thereon shall, at the time mentioned in Section 6, pay development charges to the corporation calculated in accordance with the applicable rate or rates in Schedule 1 as described in Section 8. Section 4 refers to develops. As such, it's important to look at the definition of development. Development is defined in the bylaw as the construction, erection, or placing of one or more buildings or structures on land, or the making of an addition or alteration to a building or structure that has the effect of changing the size or usability thereof, and includes all enlargement of existing development which creates new dwelling units or additional non-residential space, and includes work that requires a change of use building permit as per Section C1314 of the Ontario Building Code, and redevelopment has a corresponding meaning. As is clearly noted in the definition, the addition of non-residential space is considered as development. As such, DCs apply to the creation of this non-residential space, and we'd like now to address how this DC amount was calculated. Well, it's pretty straightforward. As mentioned earlier, the floor space created was 313 square meters. The commercial DC rate at the time of permit application was $237.88 per square meter. And applying this rate to the floor space yields a total DC amount of $74,456.44. The complaint letter makes reference to the fact that the DC amount charged does not relate or correspond in any reasonable, fair, or equitable manner to the impact upon city services. Section 562 of the Development Charges Act provides the following. However, it is not necessary that the amount of development charge for a particular development be limited to the increase in capital costs, if any, that are attributable to that particular development. The development charges need not be limited to any increase in capital servicing costs, of this particular development. The development charge rates recover costs from each category of development as a whole. DCs are not based on, nor could they be reasonably based on, each individual development on a development by development basis. So to conclude, Mr. Chair, the mezzanine is newly created non-residential space, and under the DC bylaw is considered as development. With respect to Section 28 of the bylaw, related to the 3 grounds of complaint recognized, it is staff's position that the amount of development charge was not incorrectly determined, no credit was available to be used against the development, and there was no error made in the application of this bylaw. I'd also like to bring to committee's attention that staff has consistently included mezzanine floor areas when determining total non-residential space when development charges are calculated. It should also be noted that a DC credit amount towards subsequent redevelopment is also given when mezzanine floor space is removed during renovations or demolitions. Mr. Chair, based on the above and our report respectfully submitted, we respectfully request that the complaint be dismissed. I'd be happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Okay, thank you. I'll look for questions. Councillor Usher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to refer to the two diagrams, and I'm going to refer to both of them. I'm trying to understand the difference between the two. So can you tell me A-02? What is that telling me? Is this a roof? Is it a floor?
It's the second floor. Councillor Usher, your mic.
With your permission, Mr. Chair, if I can do it from here, I have all my documentation, so
Not a
ask for your
problem.
indulgence.
Go ahead.
So, through the chair, to answer Councillor Usher's question, sheet A-02 depicts the newly created mezzanine floor plan.
Anything further?
So what is A-01?
A-01 reflects some interior alterations that took place on the main floor level and is also submitted to help plan examination staff address exiting from the mezzanine floor space. So that would be the main floor level at ground.
So just so that I can understand, the development charge is based mostly on what we have on A-01?
Through the chair, no, the development charges are based on strictly what you see in A-02. There's a notation, and if I can help the counselor, there's a notation. You will see some grid lines that are basically letters in circles up at the top of the page. So if you were to look between grid lines D and E, you'll see the text there. It says mezzanine, and directly below that, 313 square meters.
Say that again, D and what?
It's between grid lines D and E at the top of the page, roughly.
I'm not quite sure I understand what the development charges is based on then, because
Perhaps if
I'm trying to get the exact
Yeah.
floor area.
If you take, because of the nature of it, if you take this picture that we were given by the complainant and put it right beside it on A-02, it's just a smaller version of the same thing, but because it's got the shading, what you can't tell is that there's and you'll see it between B and C, it says open to below. You see that? So that's looking over, if you will, down, and there's no floor area there for the DCs to be calculated on. Is that at all helpful to you?
No, I appreciate, no, because I've got that too, but the point that I wanted to make here was that all of these on A, through you, Mr. Chair, on A-01, the various rooms, the hand washing, the locker room, all of these, are these all new? And are those taken into consideration? Are those most of the development charges, or is it? Because when I heard the applicant identified it, he paid development charges on part of this already, it sounded to me.
Through the chair, if I can clarify a few points. The main floor has been already addressed back in 2014. There were additional rooms created in the 2016 or 2017 permit, if you will, but those do not trigger development charges because the use is already commercial. If you alter an existing commercial use, the DC bylaw does not stipulate that you charge development charges. So we would not charge and did not charge development charges for any newly created rooms on the main floor, because it's an already established commercial use. We did that back in 2014. What was newly added in 2017 in terms of non-residential space, and you'll recall that is determined as development under the definition, was the 313 square meters in the mezzanine. Those 313 square meters triggered the development charges on the second floor, because essentially, under the building code, it is a second floor, and the building code matrix that I circulated before my presentation, the architect himself indicates that the 313 square meters is a new second floor.
Another question, Mr. Chair. So, 8-02, the mezzanine. I thought that the development charges would be based on services that are being used. So if I look on this floor, the mezzanine floor, I'm trying to figure out the services that are being used on that floor in that new capacity. So can I get an answer for that?
Through the chair, I'll take a stab at that, Councillor. So I think we're going to have to unpack a few of the general concepts underpinning DCs to help with some of the understanding with that. DCs are generally calculated for our rate calculation purposes, sort of from a top-down level, citywide, then to the various developments that you have here. What I'm going to try to do for you, I'm going to try to provide that logic chain between this development and that citywide charge that's applied. So the first thing I think is important to note is that, as Mr. Kokoris indicated, there is additional space that's being created here. So that additional space means that the usability of the business is increasing. That means that there's either more employees that are going to be occurring, there's more storage space perhaps that allows for more customer use of the building or anything like that. So there's more use involved in the building itself. It's important to note that we're not recovering DCs just for the direct costs of the servicing for that development. So most of our DC costs are actually related to trunk works, so trunk sanitary sewers, road costs, pollution treatment plant expansions and things like that. For example, for commercial rate calculation purposes, over 60% of our DCs are actually for those network things that are cumulative effect for development across the city. From there, when you start rolling up, then when we do our DC rate calculations, we're looking at total growth costs for all infrastructure for the 20-year period, divided by the total growth citywide for that 20-year period as well, right? So as I mentioned, any new space is part of that forecast that we're calculating for, so it's captured in our rate calculations, which means we need to recover for it. So as I mentioned, we have a citywide charge here. We're not applying DCs based on a specific development and the services that are related to that development. It's just the new space in general. And the other thing is there's not a direct relationship that's required per the Act, as Mr. Kokoris indicated. Hopefully that helps.
Certainly does. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to make sure I've got this, if the proponent had, or the complainant, pardon me, had created a non-load bearing ceiling, like just a tile ceiling or something like that, we wouldn't even be in this situation, correct? Because there would be no increase to the capacity of usage of the property, is that correct?
Through the chair, the creation of a ceiling would be a material alteration under the code, and as far as the development charges bylaw would be concerned, it would not trigger development charges. It's a ceiling.
I have a question for our staff, whoever's most relevant to answer it. Given we were circulated a previous council decision, I wonder if you can comment on two things related to that. One, what was the rationale, and I can read what's in the actual letter. Was there any rationale beyond what was given or what is noted in the resolution for the decision? And two, the DC bylaw, or the DC bylaw has changed since that time period, is my understanding. Is there any changes that would have been relevant to that situation and how it's being compared to today?
Through the chair, I think this is going to be a two-part answer between myself and Mr. Yeoman. So I'll start. If I can provide a little bit of history on the previous case, if you want to call it that, from 2014. It should be noted that Corporate Services Committee heard the appeal on September 9th, 2014, and voted to dismiss the appeal. It subsequently went to council on September 16th, and council overturned that decision and rectified the error made by staff. You've asked about what was behind that decision. I'd have to refer to just the resolution itself. Staff are still not clear as to where the error was, with all due respect. And as far as the next part of the question, I think I'm going to refer that to Mr. Yeoman.
Through the chair, for the changes to the 2014 DC bylaw, they pertain to conversion and demolition credits for existing industrial buildings. So at the time when the application previously came forward, the old bylaw was in place. Our conversion and demolition credits were not favorable in those circumstances, which I think was one of the reasons that that really impeted the appeal at the time. Since then, we have made changes to those provisions to allow that kind of conversion and credits for that, but we're talking about new space here, not the conversion of existing space. So nothing changed from the 2009 bylaw to the 2014 bylaw that I think would impact this.
Through the chair, thank you. Both of those, the answers to your questions, despite the two-parterness, it was very helpful.
Sorry, Councillor, could you repeat that last?
I said the answers were helpful, Mr. Chair.
Sorry. Clerk had my attention for a minute there. Okay, I still have one question. It's exactly the same question. So before they came in with these drawings that I'm looking at here, which are really phase 2 drawings, was there a floor? Was there a mezzanine? Apart from, I understand covering the washrooms on the ground floor, but was there an existing mezzanine in this building? In other words, what I'm trying to get at, has the floor area usable or unusable? Because you can have mezzanines in industrial buildings that are totally unusable, but it still is an existing floor area. And what I want to know is, was there floor area, or has there been an addition of floor area as a result of this building permit being granted?
Thank you, through the chair to the chair. There was no floor area, no second floor area. Whether there was an actual ceiling at that level, staff is not aware of, but I'm only going to refer to the permit application that under description of proposed work indicates second floor, and it is considered an addition. This is what the applicant has stipulated. And also what was circulated to you, again, I'm going to refer back to that Ontario Building Code matrix. That's the 8.5 by 11 sheet. If you were to look at the top row, there's a project description. In the third column from the left, you'll see new. As you scroll further down under building area, you'll see gross area new, 313. So the architect on the drawings that were submitted with the application confirms that there was new floor area of 313 square meters added.
Where I was lost on that was the term two fields above that, where it said alteration. That's what was confusing me a little bit, if you clarify that.
Yes, I'd be happy to, Mr. Chair, through you. The alteration includes the construction of the rooms, some of the rooms on the main floor, which again, no DCs were imposed upon.
Thank you. Other questions, Councillor Morgan?
I have two other comments. One, I should have mentioned earlier, I did commit to noting for the tribunal that Councillor Helmer, who would normally be a member of this tribunal, and I know this is an item in his ward, wanted me to mention that he's out of town for a policy conference that was scheduled months ago. Otherwise, he would absolutely be here to engage in this. And I did commit to mentioning that for the committee. My question that I forgot to answer earlier, maybe more for Mr. Card than anyone else, and that is, during the course of the tribunal today, the term precedent came up in reference to a previous decision and trying to relate it to this decision. Our staff have commented on some of the differences between that previous decision and the context and those sorts of items. And precedent is more a legal term to me than at least I know that I have to ask a lawyer a question when I hear that, because I want to make sure, is there any sort of precedent that's been set here, in your opinion? Does the bylaw compel us to act in a certain way because of the way that we've done before?
Let's see if he wants to.
Or the way that council has done before, I should say?
Mr. Carr, are you comfortable answering this in public session?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
In a word, the answer is no. There wouldn't be a precedent, and even if there were, the decisions of the tribunal are not binding on the tribunal. So I think on both counts, I should also say I did look at the earlier decision. I could not understand any rationale or what we would call a ratio for that decision as well.
Thank you.
Again, very helpful.
Okay, I'm going to turn to the representative for the complainant again to provide any further oral evidence or any further submissions in reply to issues that Civic Administration has raised. In short, this is an opportunity for rebuttal.
We have touched on the word precedent. I think it's important to note that development charges and sort of are sometimes a hammer solution to not everything being a nail, especially for businesses like ours. And that the question of what council's decision and reasoning might have been, I think we're an attempt to find another tool. But I would offer that this will probably not be the last time this decision comes up for this committee. Speaking personally, I have probably once every 3 months a business approach us and say, how do we deal with the fact that we have to, work with these regulations? And I think the implementation and the changes made to the 2014 bylaw represented a great step forward by city staff in making situation better for businesses like ours. And I want to give them credit, certainly, for making that situation. And our business is an outlier, perhaps based on the fact that the plans we designed were for a bylaw 5 years ago. And we are just finishing those now because we are in that. And so to to be able to not sort of be under that kind of, like to see the end of that kind of era and the new era moving forward is reassuring. And I hope that we can find a way to make this bearable for our business. I really appreciate your time and the time of the staff.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to ask committee, is there any need to go in camera for legal advice? If there isn't, then at this point, it's up to us to make a determination. We can pass a motion to adjourn the hearing to a fixed date and time to receive further information or submissions on issues or the issue or issues, factual or legal. Or you can adopt a motion, a recommendation to council on the merits of the complaint, or you can dismiss the complaint, whatever it would be your decision to do that. Okay, so that's where we're at. Councillor Asher.
Well, Mr. Chair, I listened carefully to this situation, and I remember the former complaints back in 2014, and I feel like I understand this, and I have a hard time trying to renege on this, and the only thing that I could do based on the information that I have is to move that we dismiss the complaints or the appeal, whatever we want to call it.
Your motion would be to dismiss the complaint. Okay.
Thank you. I put myself in the shoes of if this were an industrial use and they increased their square footage what decision would I make there, and what decision would I make if it was a residential appeal and vice versa. And my response would be akin to Councillor Usher's, that we dismiss this at this point in time. Staff have outlined the rules of the DC law and also how it relates to the DC Act itself, and that's the situation that we're in. This proponent has increased the usage of the property, and there are rules that need to be followed in that. DCs don't only just pay for pipes and that sort of thing, they pay for our roads, transportation, and with 300 more individuals coming into this property, by just looking at the matrix here, what the capacity usage increase is, that's my opinion on that.
So I have a mover and a seconder. Any further discussion? Okay. I'm going to then, failing any further discussion, call the question. Would you move it, please, Councillor? Oh. There we go. And I'll call the question.
Motion carries 4-0.
Okay, so the recommendation is the motion to dismiss was, did pass. And now I need a motion for us to adjourn as the Administrative Tribunal and reconvene as Corporate Services Committee. Councillor Park. Call a question. I will advise the complaint. This will go to council next week for debate before full council. Thank you very much. Let me just turn to our agenda. We have completed all of our public agenda items, have we? Councillor Park.
Thank you. Before I move a motion to go in camera for the other items, I'd like to declare an interest on C3 in relation to a property matter.
Go in camera.
I should note that on your added agenda, you'll see a revised reason for C4, so I did want to point that out for clarity.
Call a question. So folks, we'll be moving across the hall into the committee room, and we will adjourn from there because there'll be nothing to be reported out in this camera chamber. So
Motion carries 4-0.